It's a pleasure to be with you at the Asia Pacific Community Music Network Conference. A great opportunity to build a more intimate relationship between Latin America and the Pan-Amazonian region and the region of the Asia Pacific countries and peoples. I'm speaking to you after 15 years of living in the Amazon in the state of Pará. I'm speaking actually from the south of Brazil right now, where there's been a chance to reflect on the experience of fascism inside Brazil and where it becomes particularly difficult to develop the kind of performance, education, activism inside communities using music, dance, and theatre particularly to enable communities to transform themselves. One of the deepest influences on me inside the Amazon has been to see rivers turn to dust and forests turn to ash where I live. But on a very inspiring level, one of the deepest influences has been to come across the concept, the pre-industrial indigenous concept of good living, bem viver. And good living is very interesting because today it has become, in times of polarized elections and fascism returning to every single continent in the world, good living has become a source of hope for a post-capitalist world. And in this perspective, a perspective of a cooperative relationship rather than an exploitative relationship with Mother Earth, with the resources of the world, and a relationship of cooperation between peoples rather than competition and conflict. This concept is giving many people inside Latin America, many people throughout the world, hope that there is already a mature and holistic alternative to the kind of fragmented and conflicted world that we're living in today. But good living is a challenge. It's not just a focus or a vision. And I say that because I live within an African indigenous community, a community that voted for Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro inspired by Trump. And this gives us two profound challenges. And I think today you're going to have a look at some aspects of our projects, but how they've been influenced by a very inspiring collaboration with Hong Kong, with Singapore, with Taiwan, with South Korea, with New Zealand, with Australia, as part of a sort of global process of learning and exchanging and advocating for social justice, for economic justice and ecological justice. So you're going to meet today people who I've worked with. The first time I came to Hong Kong, a young translator who today has become an exceptional activist, cultural activist, working through the arts, working particularly in communities, but also working, translating all kinds of community arts pedagogies and methods into political organizations like the Umbrella Movement. You're going to meet the person who I've worked with for 25 years, Manuela Souza, who's today inside the Amazon, taking care of our project there, who will speak to you about how her experience inside Taiwan, inside Hong Kong, inside New Zealand, has given her greater confidence that it's possible to build collaborations across the world, to build good living, to nurture good living. You're also going to see how the Maori children inside New Zealand, Aotearoa, inspired us inside the Amazon to think so deeply about the relationship between security and self-confidence and trust, and being embedded and rooted inside an ancestral indigenous culture. And then you're going to see 3 fragments of our project inside the Amazon, which has gone into Hong Kong, gone into Taiwan, gone into New Zealand and Australia, exchanging stories, but also inspiring through the recovery and reinvention of roots. You're going to see one fragment which tells you where we're based and where we're working, which deeply, vividly reveals how vulnerable the world is today. But then you're going to see how we predicted just 4 or 5 years before the pandemic climate collapse, and how necessary it is to be thinking in an emergency kind of perspective. And finally, you're going to see the challenges we face today. People who've lost their indigenous origins, people who are seduced by the security of knowing that they have food today and tomorrow, and people who are even prepared to stone and violate innocent children, innocence within themselves, in order to be able to not look at those deep contradictions and complicities inside their own lives. But the fact that these young people inside the Amazon, who didn't know that they were Amazonian, didn't know that they had African and indigenous origins, can perform the truth of what's happening inside their communities and have the techniques, the methods to listen to those that think differently, to those who oppose them. The fact that we have now young people who have learned from exchanges with the Asian and Pacific region, knowing that there's solidarity flowing in both directions, those are resources of hope.
Rios de Encontro dá as boas-vindas a vocês à Amazônia. E a nossa comunidade Cabelo Seco. Nós somos todos filhos de pescadores e de lavadeiras, onde o rio Tocantins encontra com o rio Itacaiunas. O rio é nosso sustento e nossa rua principal. A ilha é o nosso pátio. Eles vêm sustentando nossa comunidade afro-indígena por séculos. Agora, as florestas, na qual criam nossos rios voadores, estão sendo desmatadas e queimadas. Nós estamos sofrendo a pior seca da história. Os nossos rios estão secando. Como nós podemos proteger a Amazônia da exploração até a morte pelas elites globais e pelas grandes mineradoras? Se a gente não souber que a gente vive na Amazônia ou que ela promove as chuvas no mundo.
Bom, Manu, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Can we speak in English, no problem?
Okay, let's try. If I have difficulties, I will tell you.
Okay. When you think about our first experiences in Hong Kong, when we gave workshops with many activists, many artists, many community project leaders, do you find hope in those memories?
Yes. So many moments and collaborations in workshops, in manifestations, in the streets, agricultural communities too. And I think each place is gives some seeds. And also, of course, we saw challenges, we saw people fighting for their rights. And in Hong Kong, one thing which was always interesting is most of the people who participate in our workshops, they were activists. They were like artists, teachers, students, but all of them, they are connected with human rights, different areas. And always people were so engaged inside the workshops and involved and inspiring. And in the end, in our dialogue circles, reflecting about what we have been living together, people bring so many insights and they're so dedicated. And this was very special.
I really was moved by the importance of giving dialogical communication to people. Because I since then, in all kinds of workshops that I do, either in community music or theater or circle painting, I make space for people to talk, with just two people, because I've seen how it really worked for people who are more inhibited, either because of the environment, of their confidence, of language competence, or of intimacy of the topic. So it was one of the important philosophy, I think, I've learned from Transformers that is still used in most of my work. Even now when I work with people in meetings, I tend to ask them, okay, so let's now divide into pairs and then you discuss. So after that, you either tell us what you have told other person or what you have heard from the other person. So it really gives a lot more confidence or space for people to at least to listen and to be listened.
Also, another very special memory was when we went in Taiwan, in a rural area in 30 curves. So we went up to the mountain, 30 curves to get the people really who work in the land. And it was very special because they cultivated the tea, the famous tea from Asia. And they have flowers also, which we could eat. And we have like special moments with dinner. And the workshop with them was so beautiful, was so great. But all this care really connected me with the people in Brazil who also works with land, and they carry inside them this something special, the solidarity, the generosity, the beauty of the place, the beauty of the people. I think that was one of the great moments I lived in Asia, because I never really imagined I will be in this kind of place. Even like I work in Brazil with the landless movement, the countryside, and know this quality of these people who are cultivating the lands, who are making the fruits, everything we eat with their own hands. And meet them there in Asia was so amazing. We remember like we had a dream to put together people from Brazil and people from Third Curves to experience this humanity in common. Also I have amazing memories from a big protest in Hong Kong against the WTO, the World Trade Organizations. And like I think it had people from all Asia, that area. So I think there are people from South Korea, Indian, Philippines, Hong Kong, China. And that was really big and like a big armed force with bombs, very violent. But the people had their own way to go to the streets, to pray in the streets as a protest, and very courageous, because the place where the WTO meeting was take place was inside the sea in a big event center. And like people from South Korea, they went to the sea, very cold sea, very deep, and they tried to get there with a lot of security boats, and they went there with their own bodies as a way of protesting. That was very amazing. They use their own bodies to defend their human rights. And a lot of people also from the rural areas were there, defend the food for all, defend their rights, health, education. That was very special. I was so impressed. That was quite a long time ago, probably 2005, maybe. Really broke prejudices who is cultivated here in Brazil against people from age. And how also they are fighting for their human rights as we are fighting here. Mm-hmm. We were fighting here at that time.
It's interesting because you speak about the performance of protest. It is not just performance like a workshop or seeing performance artists in Hong Kong. And you speak about the farmers in Taiwan, but also the farmers from Korea in the street. And there was no anger, no confrontation. It was a performance of respect, of spirituality, to see the collective discipline, but there was a kind of humility.
Yeah. And even like when we went to China, also like we give like workshops, clandestine workshops for activists in China. And we meet like big communities, like camps. We went in that community who suffer
earthquake.
Yeah, and they have like that big, amazing
survivor camps.
Yeah, and also inside that place, they create a kind of community with space for people to be together, to integrate, cultivate their traditional customs. Could be the tea, the way they serve the tea. When I think about now in Brazil, how many prejudices people begin to have against Chinese people. Mm-hmm. And all the time I remember that moment. And how we need not forget who are making the damage here in the Amazon now is Chinese government, it's not the Chinese people. And what people are joking in the social medias, and the people cannot heard about Chinese people now, because it's create all this kind of prejudices. And we know people in Hong Kong, people in China also are fighting for their rights, for their air, for their forests, as we here also are fighting for that.
Yeah!
In New Zealand, I think I had, I don't know, maybe 1 week.
Yeah.
But it was a very special too, especially meeting with the Maoris and how they have their rituals and they have their care to enter in their temples. And we went to the schools and all the kids receive you with a ritual and with so special humanity too in that places. I think that was very special. And touch, because it's so strong, the way they receive you and understand their struggle and where they are today is so inspiring. With their indigenous rights protected. We are living now in Brazil like a situation we are lost in all the rights of the indigenous people. Indigenous people are lost in their lands and lost their forests, lost their water, their rivers. And New Zealand now is so inspiring. Protect, even like guarantee indigenous people in the government. We know, like, I don't know, 2-3 days ago, they invite a woman, a Maori, for the, I don't know how to say in English, Relações Exteriores.
International relations.
Yeah. This woman will communicate it with the world. Mm-hmm. It's so symbolic. When here, our government is killing the indigenous people. It's creating a lot of prejudice against them. Mm-hmm. It's
co-opting.
Yeah, because they are so poor, because they are lost in their land. So it's so sad. But I think we need to learning. That's the seed of hope with New Zealand. We need to learning with their process.
Do you think the people who met you in the workshops, what do you think they learned from your experience in the Amazon? What did they learn from our transformance pedagogy?
One thing of which always they give this feedback is how our process connected people in just a few hours, related people through their own histories, create possibilities to work, to live in a collective and a respectful way. We are just exchange histories. Sometimes we didn't use words, but we use movement. We use touch. We use eyes, communication, expression, creation, and this put people together and create seeds of new possibilities of acting. And they could see how they could use this kind of methodology in the school, in the classrooms, with their social movements, their artistic performances. It's a way to cultivate and motivate people to be together and acting together. I think that was something great they said to us.
Yeah, no, this was true. You said before, their reflections gave us knowledge about our work.
Mm-hmm.
We learned more about what we were doing because of the quality of their participation.
Yeah.
And the quality of their reflection. They seem, I think, particularly in Asia, you feel people are very polite. They speak about social face, this sensitivity to not hurting anybody, not to damage their social value, their social reputation. And at the same time, though they were very respectful, they were very honest.
Yeah.
And very philosophical, very pedagogical, very human.
Yeah. And another thing very special, they trust us. And the way they give the payment, the support was so clear, no shadows, and very direct and respectful. I felt as a professional respected and valued.
It's interesting because they pay you before you begin.
Yeah.
You feel this is something that gives you hope?
For these days, I think it's a very challenging question because we're living a situation which becomes so hard to sustain our hope here. But we are here. We have our center. We have our medicinal garden. And we are involved with social movements, defend the rivers, but the situation is so extreme, like the air become each time more difficult to breathe here. Now for many years, no lands were recognized for the indigenous people. We have a lot of communities waiting for their land, we call in Brazil land legalization. Mm-hmm. And the indigenous people become in a very hard difficulties because sometimes they cannot cultivate the lands. Sometimes they need to move lands because they cannot stay in some lands. And the indigenous people who are in the lands, also they want to destroy these laws who protect that area, especially because it's very rich natural areas with a lot of minerals like gold and iron, pure water. And for me, this is a question. I don't have an answer.
do you feel that there is potential for collaboration between Asia and the Pacific and the Amazon? They understand the importance of the Amazon.
Yes, I think they understand. Now, I think how this could happen with all this we are living with the pandemic and the reality and all this intervention of China in the Amazon. I think it's a new moment. But the last 2-3 years in Brazil was very accelerated, the changes and how they are making decisions and dealing with a fascist government too. But I think it's very interesting for us to cultivate this dialogue with Asia, with New Zealand. This could make us stronger to be here. We are connected, we are in the same world, and we depend one another to live, to breathe, to have rights. I think it's a time if it's very important, even though we can't travel, I think it's a very special moment for us to be connected with, even with our small actions locally. What we are doing here, like where I am in Marabá, in Amazon, and what people in Hong Kong are doing in their community, or people in New Zealand are taking care of their river. I think we need to exchange that experience to strong ourselves here and there. And to open our imagination. I think this kind of dialogue can open our imagination, give us courage to be alive and continue to create this world of good living for people.
I cannot say our workshops are world-changing workshops. It would be too proud to say that is there, because I think cultural workers or community workers is just part of a big web of people, activists, educators, lawyers, social workers, people who are doing the cleaning, the security of the society, etc. Together, we can make a little step forward. So I would say we are trying to do a little part, and we need a lot of support from other people. Otherwise, it's just the 3 hours of one person who lived for 60 years that may feel a little bit more positive energy. This cannot make a change in itself. It's just one small window that we might have knocked. We may not be able to even open it. But if we knock more, maybe there will be some windows open, and then social workers can come in, and then workers' union can come in, and then lawyers can come in, etc.
I think this is a good place to close our conversation just today, not forever, but just today. Nor for 15 years or anything like that. But I think the hope that I have is listening to this kind of conversation. I remember, and looking back, remembering where you were and where I was and where we are now, and think I never imagined this conversation, And I think that's, as it were, acknowledging how special this kind of long process is, the long friendship, the long relationship, the long processes. And of course, just to be provocative, I would say, coming from the Amazon today, and when I met you, I wasn't really knowing that I would live all so much time in the Amazon. These processes take time in a time where there is little time.
Yeah.
And you know that very well, of course, in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And that ecological question is one, but the other, of course, then is how can we open our own political and pedagogical imaginations? So we say, right, all the professions need to pass through these processes, not as a workshop of choice outside of school, but as the foundations of education for sustainability, education for transformation. And so probably that's our great task. But I kind of feel when I meet you, I think that process, that challenge has many good people to keep everything moving forward. You know, this isn't dependent upon one or two people. This is something that people take, particularly through their personal lives, to embed it. But this really enables us to imagine something not any longer being a CCCD workshop, or as you say, a community music or community theatre workshop, but needs to be transformed into the foundations of what we understand as education, you know. And I think this kind of conversation, with the sense of the pandemic, you know, gives a kind of focus and an urgency. And at some place, I think, in every person in the world now, there's a sense, even if they're in denial, this experience of the pandemic is being registered in their metabolism. It's being registered in their personal and their collective unconscious. And I think these, just listening to you, I'm thinking this openly for the first time, these are potentials for hope. You know, this is a very, very polarized and very extreme time, as you say, but it's creating a lived experience across the world, which will become a reference, you know, become a resource for many generations looking at the same experience, you know, when they think about the future or think about tomorrow.